Hello and welcome back to the Teacher Experience podcast. I'm your host, Miss Dillon, and today we are diving into the world of primary education with a very special guest. Taylor is a dedicated primary school teacher and a member of SLT. Taylor brings a wealth of experience and a deep passion for integrating play into every aspect of learning. Join us as we explore how playful learning can unlock creativity, curiosity, and a lifelong love of learning. Whether you're an educator, a parent, or simply curious about the magic that happens when play meets education, you are in the right place. Welcome, Taylor.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go straight into our first question, which is please share with our audience your what went well and EBI for this week.
Thank you. Oh well, obviously we're in the depths of the summer holidays now, which has been really lovely, and I've had such a productive week in terms of school and also life. So it's really tricky with the summer holidays because I feel like I maybe shouldn't do schoolwork and I should do all life, but I have just recently moved schools, and I had lots and lots of things to organise, sort out, prepare a classroom. So I've been quite busy. So I spent the first part of the week in my school, which was fantastic, getting organised, and I spent the second half of the week just doing really nice things for me. So that's kind of how I've been balancing it. So for me, something that has gone really well, I'd say I've actually established a little bit of a balance, which is quite tricky sometimes. And I have organised, not quite finished, but I've almost organised my classroom. So that is a huge relief going into the new school year. And I've just had a really lovely week, end of the week, just spending time with friends and family. So for me, I think that's been quite a successful start to the week. It's quite a successful week, really.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I always love speaking to primary school teachers because it's so different to what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm a secondary school science teacher, and whenever I speak to primary school teachers, getting the classroom ready is always such a big part of the start of their year. I think it's very different to what I experience. So as a secondary school science teacher, I obviously work in a lab, and we can't really decorate our classroom at all because obviously there's so many health and safety regulations. We have our notice boards. I've only got 2 in my classroom where we have things about our mental group on there. But other than that, I don't really decorate, but I love speaking to primary school teachers because you can get so creative with your classroom. Obviously the kids spend all of their time with you in that room. So it's such an important and big part of your preparation for the school year, I guess. But yeah, it's not something that I get to do really, which is a shame because it must be so fun.
It is. I think it's really hard because I really, really enjoy getting my classroom set up. And I think, as we'll talk about more a little bit later, when you do have your classroom set up for a play, for a continuous provision sort of style, a play-based learning, it does take a lot of setting up. It does take a lot of organising. And I think it is very, very different. I said, obviously being in a science lab, and then I'm here making areas and doing displays. It is a very, very different environment, but it is actually something that I do enjoy. I really enjoy getting my classroom set up, getting it organised, and obviously we'll talk about it a bit more later, but it makes my life easier in the long run when it's all set up, because then it runs itself, which I think is, the classroom does run itself, and it is really so I do quite enjoy it. But I moved to a new school and I've had to start right from the start and start right from the scratch. That has been really tricky, but I'm nearly there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it is nice that you can also have so much of your personality and your vision for your class, and you can create that environment because our environment has such an impact on how we feel. And unfortunately, our science labs are a bit clinical because they have to be for health and safety reasons. And when a pupil walks into a classroom and it feels warm and comforting and welcoming, it kind of sets the tone, and it will impact how they react to you as a teacher. So it's so nice that you guys get to do that. So you are a member of SLT and a primary school teacher. I think our guests would love to hear kind of what a typical day looks like for you.
So with my role, I am in class 4 days a week and I'm out of class 1 day a week. So a typical day when I'm in class, I'm quite an early bird. So I am up at just before 6. I get to school early. My brain works best early in the morning. So I like to get to school for about 7:30, and then I have 7:30 till 8:30 to just work quietly, get things ready and get things organised. Whether that is organising for the day, for the week, getting planning done, that's for the following week. That's what I like to do that first hour of the day. My brain is most productive then, so that's when I try to get all the tasks. So not school's obviously quite quiet then as well, so that's kind of how I work best. And then obviously during the day, we start off with phonics. We do maths and English of a morning, and it'll be lunchtime. We then will, in the afternoon, we'll have a topic base. It could be science, it could be history, it could be PE, and then then the children will go home. And then I try to stay at school till about between 4:30 and 5:30. I work best by getting all my work done at school, and when I come home, I try not to bring any work home with me. So I know everyone works really differently, so I try to stay at school, and then I go home, and then I can tend to switch off then. So that's what a typical day when I'm in the classroom looks like. If I'm out of class on my SLT day, it looks very different to that, and it's kind of given me a little bit of a taste to what life would be like if I was out of class permanently. And I really enjoy my SLT day out of class. Being in a new school, a new environment, there's lots of things to do, and we're working really hard on curriculum and embedding lots of things into the school, and learning walks, supporting staff. I'm ECT mentor and things like that as well. So that's kind of what my out of class day is. No day's ever the same, but that's kind of the things that I am focusing on at the moment. It's ECT, mentoring, curriculum. I'm teaching and learning lead. I'm deputy DSL, so I have lots of little jobs that kind of crop up throughout the day.
Wow, it's such a busy week. Just a few things I picked up on there. So, with your days in classroom, you said that you teach maths and English sort of in the morning. In secondary school, if you're in charge of timetables, it's a massive job, especially if you're a massive secondary school that's got nearly 2,000 pupils. Getting that timetable sorted is a huge job. We also plan for kind of the core subjects, GCSE subjects, to be taught in the morning and earlier on in the week. Is that also reflective in primary school in your experience then?
Yes, definitely. And I think it is, especially, I mean, I am predominantly early years and key stage 1 based. So I think I've never really done upper key stage 2, so I can't really speak. But for me, I think it is quite common for maths and English to be taught of a morning, and phonics, those core subjects to be taught, but it's not exclusively taught then. So on a Monday, I don't actually teach something first thing in the morning. I have a period where we're in the provision, where we're learning with the children, we're focused on that learning through play. So as a whole, we do it first thing, and then my children can access maths and English and things throughout the day in that continuous provision environment that we do have in the classroom, and that play-based learning. But as a whole, I think it is done first thing in the morning. The children are in, they're most energised then. But I do sometimes, especially if it's a practical maths, I'm not opposed to doing it in the afternoon either for those children. Sometimes I find with the younger children, writing in the afternoon can be tough for them.
That's so interesting. So as a primary school teacher, do you have complete autonomy over when you teach lessons, or is it directed by your senior leadership team? Obviously, as a secondary school teacher, we get our timetable at the beginning of the year. You are teaching year 7 science on a Friday afternoon, for example. So do you get complete autonomy over when you do things?
I think that is very school dependent. So I've been teaching for going into my 11th year now, so a little bit of time, and it's been completely different at different schools. So my previous school was a really big 3 entry primary school. We weren't in complete control of our timetable, because when you're in such a big school, you've got to have PE timetables. You can't just go and do it when you want, because there are 600 children in the school. It's impossible. I'm actually in a much more of a smaller setting now, and my timetable is given to me now. So again, I think it is very setting dependent. Whereas, so my previous school, 3 entry, I was year 1 lead, so I did the timetable, bar the big subjects like PE or music, which had to be done as a whole school, but we controlled everything else. So we didn't always do maths and English of a morning, but in my new setting, it's done by the head teacher.
Great, thank you so much. We have both secondary school and primary school teachers listening, so it's great for obviously us as secondary school teachers to hear about your world, because obviously it is so different. I'd love to move on to learning through play, because I know it's something that you're really passionate about. So my next question is, what are the core principles of learning through play? And why do you believe it's so effective for young children?
So learning through play is something that I am so unbelievably passionate about, and I think it is something that I will wholeheartedly believe in forever. And that sounds crazy, but I genuinely do. I think, I've been teaching for a while now, and I've mainly done reception year 1, year 2, a bit of year 3. So that's kind of all in the younger years of education. And I've taught in year 1, I've done it formal, where it's not learning through play, but then I did introduce it into my previous school after spending a few years in early years, and the difference in the children and their happiness has been phenomenal. As a year 1 teacher mainly, I always found that transition from reception to year 1 really quite tricky. Children went from being in reception, which is always quite a play-based environment, they'd come into year 1, it'd be like, right, you're going to sit at a table now and you're going to sit all day and you're going to do this, and the children just really, really, really struggled, understandably. And I started to do a little bit of research, and there's an amazing person called Alistair Bryce-Clegg. He is a real advocate for learning through play. And he said something, it's never left me. He said, these children are 6 weeks older when they've come to you. How does that make you think they can then just suddenly learn formally? I don't know, after I've heard that, I've never looked back. That was the real start of kind of how I started with the journey of learning through play. And for me, I think what's important, it has to be structured differently in year 1 to it does in early years to make it effective. And for me, the core principles are just having. I've got some notes here. Sorry, just so I remember. And for me, it's how it's structured. You've got your basic provision, you've got your continuous provision, you've got enhanced provision, and you've got adult-led learning. And all those words I've just said there, I bet as a science teacher, you're like, whoa, that's so much. But I think that little provision pyramid that's outlined by Alistair Bryce-Clegg is an amazing way for me. That's how I started, and that's kind of the core principles for me of how it is based. You have your basic provision, which is just the things that are there for the children to access all the time. You have that continuous provision, which is based on your assessment, things that you notice. Oh, some children are struggling to hold their pencils properly. Let's build up hand strength. Let's have some things that will help them with that. You've got your enhanced provision, which for me in year 1 is so important. That is how you get your curriculum in. So we're doing science, we're learning about trees, we're learning about wildflowers. I'm going to have that enhanced provision in my classroom for the children to learn. They're going to go over, you'll set it all up, and you'll kind of say, oh, let's have a look what's over here, and then they'll learn it through play. And you have that adult-led learning, which is that's your curriculum teach, that's your math, that's your English, that's what you're teaching for the children, that's what you want to know. So that's kind of my core principles. And for me, I think it's just seeing how happy children are at school and how much children genuinely love to learn through play is enough for me to say that's why I want to do it. I always have happy children in my year 1 classes that are learning through play, and it doesn't impact their progress because happy children learn more. They are independent, they are creative, the skills that these children have, when you let them, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have my enhanced provision about trees, about history, or whatever we're learning about, and the children will go and learn it themselves, and that way it kind of gets, they remember it, then they're wanting to do it. And I think that's, for me, just it's when it's done effectively, I think it is the most fantastic thing. And I said, I could talk about it forever. I absolutely love it.
Thank you for explaining those core principles. I think the bit that stood out for me the most was that your reference to happiness. It's so important, and so many good things come out when pupils are happy. Transition is spoken about a lot in secondary school, but in reference to year 6 to year 7, because obviously that's such a big time for pupils, especially if they're moving site. If their primary school is a different site to the secondary school, it's such a big time for them. And their day is then completely different. They're suddenly not with one safe person all day as they were previously in year 6. They're now changing classrooms every hour. Transition is such a big thing. And I think if you are a year 7 classroom teacher, you're really conscious of it, and you do make adjustments where you can. I can imagine in year 1, that's obviously at the forefront of your mind, that you were very aware of what they were previously exposed to, and 6 weeks later, not any time at all, they were coming to you. So I think happiness is a topic of conversation in secondary schools as well. I think a lot of pupils really struggle in secondary schools with happiness, because the pressure that pupils are under to get good GCSE grades is tenfold what it was 40 years ago. I mean, the pressure is extreme, and it doesn't really come from schools. It's coming from society's pressures and what jobs and employers expect of pupils. And unfortunately, we do have pupils that don't excel academically, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be the most perfect employee for that job. So I think happiness is something that teachers in secondary schools are talking about a lot as well, and how we can kind of nurture it with all of society's pressures that are going on in the background. It's so great that this is your focus, and I'm really happy to have this conversation so that so many people can learn from you, hopefully that are also teaching in year 1 and can actually integrate some of this into their classroom. So my next question then would be, how have you found and how have you integrated it into your classroom? And if there's any specific examples that you could share as well, that would be amazing.
Well, when I first started on this journey of play-based learning, introducing it into year 1, I started it a few years ago now. Before it was starting to be talked about, but it wasn't a done thing. So I think it was quite tricky to start off with. I had this idea in my head, and actually it came through lockdown. When it was lockdown, all the children. I was a reception teacher during lockdown, and my reception children left me, and they had missed this humongous chunk of reception, and these children were going into year 1, and these children were not ready to go to year 1. They've missed out on so much of those core things that are in early years. And I was still in early years when these children transitioned to year 1, and I watched them struggle, and I thought, this is not, we can't have this. So I thought, what can we do to support these next children going? So obviously then that was this is the second lockdown now. So again, I was in early years, had another lockdown. Leicestershire had quite a few lockdowns when the rest of the country were free. So we had quite a lot of lockdowns. We had another big one just after Christmas where we were doing more online learning. And I thought, this is going to happen again. These children aren't going to be ready. So I thought, what can we do? And I started to research into play-based learning, and I started to look at, actually, there are people doing it in year 1, and actually, like I said, they're only 6 weeks older. How are these children going to be ready? So I then did a lot of research, a lot, and I kind of developed a little plan for my setting and my school. And then during my performance management, I gave my head teacher a little presentation. I think he must have been like, what's going on here? And I gave him a presentation, and I said, this is what I would love to do if you were to move me to year 1, because I was still in reception. I was early years lead, and I was like, right, I would love to move to year 1. I would love to embed this into our school. I would love to support these children in that transition. So I gave them a full presentation on what I would like to do and what it would look like. And it was very much based on the Alistair Brythe he's got a provision pyramid, I think it's called. Let me just check. Yeah, the provision pyramid in his Best Practice in the Early Years book. And that's kind of how I based it. So we had that basic level provision, then the continuous, the enhanced, and the adult led. I then integrated challenges into the classroom as well to give the children that extra curriculum push, which is what's needed in year 1. So I devised like a little setup, and then we just trialled it. I had an amazing and supportive head teacher, and he he enjoyed research-based things. So I showed him the research, I showed him all the things that I'd done, and that is where we started. And he fully supported me in that. And we set it up in year one, and it was incredible. Watching these children be happy and be independent and be inquisitive and still learn and still reach those goals was amazing. And it took a lot of mindset changing from staff, from other people, but they're not sat down. How can they be learning? I said, well, learning looks so different. Oh, but they've not done this, not done this. And I think when you really unpick the national curriculum, nowhere in does it say that children need to be sat down, except for handwriting. There is nothing in that national curriculum that tells us these children need to be sat down all day. That's not there. It tells you that they do need to learn how to write sentences with capitals, finger page forth. It tells us that. It does tell us they need to be able to partition numbers into tens and ones. It does tell us that, but it doesn't tell us how we have to deliver it. So I think it's really important that we do think outside the box, and we do think how can we make these children happy. And it got to a point where it was wonderful. We had through Instagram, I had people come in to see and visit and see how it was run, and we had people from all over the country come in to watch us, and I couldn't believe it. And they were like, well, we want to implement this in our school, which is amazing. These children are independent, they're learning, they want to learn, they actually are thriving on learning. And it was lovely. And I think it had its challenges. Mindset was a huge challenge that we faced, and I think it is something that we overcome. Luckily, parents were really positive. Parents were happy. Parents said how happy their children were. And for me, and as we've kind of touched on happiness already, that's my main aim for this job. My main aim, I know I've got a curriculum to teach, I know I've got all that, but I have done my job if I've got happy children. When they are 4, when they are 5, I've actually, sometimes even 3 when they start reception. When I've got these real, happiness is the most important thing, and that's what I will always put first, is children's happiness.
It's so amazing that firstly you had such a great head teacher that supported you through this, because obviously it's something different and something obviously he wasn't really that aware of or had the research to know about. So it's amazing that he supported you through that. One that's coming in secondary schools at the moment is a lot about AI, and people are having different experiences as to whether their school is supportive of it or not. It's just a new thing that's coming in, like the play-based learning, and it's so great that he supported you. And it's also great that something so good, obviously your experience with Learn Through Play came from such a dark time, which was COVID, but actually something really good has come out of it, because you probably had more time to go through that research because we were all stuck at home. So that's such a lovely story about how it all came out. Obviously, workload is something that's referenced as a lot of reasons why teachers, secondary school, primary school, do leave. So I am curious, how did this affect your workload?
It's our workload is, and it's something that I will openly say that I do struggle with. Having a work-life balance is something that I really, really struggle with, and it's something that I'm always trying to improve and build on. And I think for me, the play-based learning doesn't affect my workload any more than planning for a formal year 1. The planning for me isn't the same. However, there is that initial setup of classroom. So I do spend a little bit of time of my summer getting my classroom sorted. For me, with your provision, you've got your basic provision has to be set up, and those are the things that children will access all the time throughout the term. However often you might change it, you might enhance it as the year goes on to match the children's skills, but that does need setting up. So that does take a little bit of time, getting it organised, it labelled. But I'm a firm believer that that basic provision will then run itself, because it's always going to be there. So I put that little bit of time in to get it set up, and then it will effectively run itself once the children have been taught how to use it. I I think for me, with workload, the only way I can personally manage it is by putting in quite strict boundaries. So I go to the gym on certain days, right? This is my, and I'll say, like, these 2 days are my late days where I'm going to, and will probably stay till 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock, but that will only be 2 days a week. I run a club on one day, so I will leave early on that day. And that's how I have to put those boundaries in for me personally. Obviously, I don't have children or anything yet, so that does also, I think, impact maybe the way that I work. Because I think if I did have children, I'd have to work in a completely different way, and I probably wouldn't be able to leave the house at 7 o'clock in the morning and come back in at 5:30 at night and do those sort of things. And I think work-life balance is something that, and just the workload is something that I think needs to be looked at for teachers, especially going forward. Because unless you know a teacher, I don't think you necessarily know how hard and how hard teachers do work, and how much of our own personal time that it does take up.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that. So if anyone's listening and they're thinking they really want to implement this into their classroom, of course, there's going to be an initial increase in workload. You need to get everything set up and ready. You're changing the format of your teaching. But after that, you said day to day, it doesn't really change that much. So think long term, guys, if you're listening and thinking, I want to implement this. I agree with what you said on workload. I think, unfortunately, it's not even really that much in schools' control. It needs to come from higher up, who's in charge of all of our schools. We've said all the time, quite a few times on this podcast, in secondary school, approximately, on average, people teach about 26 hours a week. 26 1-hour presentations, I call them, to anyone who's not a teacher. Because then I think people have a better idea of what that means. If you're asked to do 26 presentations a week, just put that down to like 18. But that decision has to can't be decided by the school, because they have a budget based on how many hours teachers teach. So we need to have those decisions come from higher up. My next question then would be, could you explain how phonics and play-based learning complement each other? Because I know it's such an important and big part of your day-to-day, well, your weekly. And yeah, how they complement each other in developing literacy skills. That would be amazing.
So phonics is my other passion, and I think phonics and reading is so unbelievably important. And I think for me, a play-based environment really does help support phonics. I think not recently, but a few years ago, the government decided that every school had to have a validated phonics scheme in the school. So everyone had to teach a scheme that had been validated by the government. And it then ramped phonics up quite a lot. Everybody was doing something different, and the new validated programs, they do have quite a demand on your timetable, which I do believe that learning to read is a fundamental skill. So I do see the importance, especially in the early years. For me, the way that when I'm in that play-based environment, when I'm with the children in the provision, the way that children will, because they're working independently, the way I can challenge them, it's like they've built a beautiful model in the construction area, and I say, oh, what's this bit here? Oh, you built a tower. Should we write the word tower? Let's label it. And then they're like, okay, let's do it. And because they've built it, and because they've made something themselves, they're so proud of it. They're actually like, oh yeah, we'll write a label. Oh, who's this? Who's in the forest that you've built? Oh, is that a lion? Should we have a go at writing the word lion? Let's use our phonics to write that word. So it comes through very, very subtly, but it's that independence, and that's something we try to encourage right from the beginning when children are in the provision. So we'll say to them, right then, what can you label? What can you write to match this? And because they have built something, they're so proud, they will happily write it. They'll add a label on, they will draw it, they will plan it. And that's just kind of how we get that extra practice. And I think as well, by having a bit more of a not as structured, or we do have a structured time, but not by having a bit more freedom, you've got more time to get in there. Like, oh, should we read a book in the book corner? Let's do this. And you've got a little bit more time to actually spend with the children. And then the more time you can spend with, the better. I think it allows for such a lovely independent environment when it does come to phonics and when it comes to writing, when it comes to reading. And I think sometimes a little bit less is almost more. If you have that little step back and you trust the children to guide their own learning, a lot of the time you'll be amazingly surprised at how you might have a reluctant writer, but when they have created something in the creative area, when they have made something in Play-Doh, when they have suddenly wrote the number 5 in sand, and you're like, hang on, how have you done? It's amazing when you've given them that opportunity to do it, because like I said, the curriculum says they've got to form their numbers to 10. Best way to start, let's do it in some sand, let's do it in different ways, and before you know it, they will transfer those skills into their books. They will transfer those skills that they have learnt, that they've practiced and they've practiced and they've practiced over and over again in that provision independently. You will then see it be applied to all of their learning.
I love those examples you gave. I love the one about the tower, when if they build the tower, and then of course it makes perfect sense when you're saying it. It just makes sense. Even as an adult, of course, you're going to remember that moment and remember how to write tower if you've gone through that process instead of just sat at a desk writing out tower because someone told you to. Of course, you're going to memorize that. It just makes perfect sense. And I love it because it's so simply perfect. Why haven't we been doing it sooner? How do you deal with, I need to say this word right because I always struggle to say this word, skepticism? Was that right? How do you deal with skepticism from parents, teachers? Have you ever had this experience, and how have you dealt with it?
I think I've potentially had more than most, to be honest with you. I think I have it in. I think I have it in lots of. I have it through Instagram. I have it through teachers. I have it through parents. I think when I do post on Instagram, I think I open myself up. So I know I almost know I open myself up, and I open myself up to a lot of opinions and criticism, but not also that. So 99% positive. But you do sort of open yourself up to that. As a whole, when I could have just been lucky, I've never really. Most parents are very pro play when you speak to them about it. When I've had parents say, "Are they going through this in year 2 as well? My children are just so happy." And I think when your child is skipping through the door of a morning, as a parent, that's all you can really ask for, isn't it? And I think I had a parent once ask me how I was preparing their child for year 2 by learning through play in year 1, and my argument for anyone will always be, I am preparing my children for year 2 by teaching the year 1 curriculum. How I'm teaching it, that's different. But I'm preparing. I'm still teaching the year 1 curriculum. I'm just doing it in a bit of a different way. So that's always something I do advise people to think about. Actually, no, I'm doing nothing different, as in the curriculum part of it. I'm teaching all those objectives. I'm just doing it in a slightly different way. So I'm preparing those children for year 2 because they've got that knowledge. I think the hardest thing to deal with is mindset of other staff. I think that's really tricky. I think when you've done lots of research and when you kind of are on board this learning through play journey that a lot of people are on, you will eat, sleep and breathe it. And sometimes if people don't understand and don't see it, it can be tricky. And I think the main thing I always try is I try to believe in myself, and that is really hard. And I always try to remember why am I doing this? I'm doing this fundamentally because I want these happy, independent, inquisitive learners. That's why I'm doing it. It's backed up by research. There's not masses and masses and masses of research yet, but more and more is coming out. And fundamentally, I've never read a bit of research where it says that 5-year-olds learn best at tables for 6 hours a day. If that research is out there, then please someone correct me. I'm always open, but I have never ever. And we all know, as an adult, we have inset teacher training days, and they're really heavy, and you get to the end of the day and it's 3 o'clock and you're like, my brain, and we're adults. And that's what children are experiencing. But if not, maybe more, because a lot of the time what we're learning isn't always necessarily new. Our inset days are refreshers, and that's cognitive overload. So imagine being 5 and learning how to read in phonics in the morning. Oh, I'm going to do some writing next, sentence writing. Oh, and then I'm going to learn something new in maths. And then, you know what, I might even learn something new in science later, and then maybe even PE. It's so much. And I think for me, the way I handle criticism, skepticism, all those things is that I fundamentally put the reason why I'm doing something. And the reason why, I said, is for those happy, inquisitive, independent learners. And it's something that I'm learning to be more and more resilient, and it's not something that comes necessarily easy to me. And it's something that imposter syndrome is something that I really do. It can cripple me sometimes, but it is just refocusing my mind and thinking about all those positives. Actually, I'm getting positive. Parents are thanking me. Their children are happy, and I said I rarely get criticism from parents. It's mainly teachers or Instagram.
Thank you for sharing your experiences there. I do agree with you. I think the core of what parents want is happy kids. If they're skipping into school, that is what they want more than anything. And if that is such a focal point of this, then I can't imagine any parents would really disagree. So thank you for sharing. The research into this, like you said, there's not massive amounts. I'm a scientist and I've worked in research previously. And I was kind of thinking before we had this chat today, why is that? But you need longitudinal studies, which take years. And with any sort of research within the education field, it's a really hard thing to measure because there's so many variables that affect the output. I used to do research in the army, which is a great environment to do research because it's such a controlled environment. There's no variables. Whereas within education, it is really hard because there's so much going on that can affect output. So I think that is why there's not that much research, and there definitely needs to be more, but it will take time for sure. What do you think, how do you envision the future for education, specifically within your year groups?
I wholeheartedly believe that, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but there's so many countries around the world that are doing education way, way better than we are. And I think and that's not down to teachers, that's down to the curriculum that we are provided with. And I think there's so many approaches, especially to early years. There's not many countries around the world that children are starting education as young as we are. And that is the most fundamental thing for me. There are countries where children are starting voice at 7, so going into year 2, year 3. And these children pick up these fundamental skills so fast. Whereas we are there where they're in year 1, they're 5. Come on, we're doing it over and over and over and over again. I will teach capitals and full stops for an entire year. And these children do pick it up, but it takes so long. And it's think about, well, why does it take? Because they're not ready. And there are so many countries around the world that don't start formal learning until they're 7. They learn some of the very basics, and it's more play based. And I think that for me would be the dream. That's where I think education should go on a personal level. I think I do wholeheartedly believe that a more play based in Key Stage 1, I do think that's maybe where it is going in the future. And I think that would be incredible. I think the impact that would have on happiness, mental health would be phenomenal for children. That is how I would dream for it to become. I think more forest schools, more outdoor learning, I think that would be incredible. And I think I can dream.
I absolutely agree with you. In reference to secondary schools, we spend 5 years preparing children to sit in science 2 exams, which is crazy. So I'm a biology teacher and I spend 5 years teaching kids how to sit 2 exams, which are about an hour and 15 minutes each. Why does it need to be 5 years of sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day I don't think it needs to be. But yeah, I do agree with you. We need to start looking at the success of other countries and seeing the changes that they've made and maybe try it out. Just please. We finish every episode on a research bite. So Taylor, can you please share your research bite for this week?
Thank you. I've actually got 2 books here for research that if anyone would like to start in a play-based environment, I think would be an amazing way to start. So there's a book by Alistair Bryce-Clegg called Best Practice in the Early Years, and that is incredible. It's an incredible book for starting for the foundation of how to start play-based learning. And for anyone that would like to think about play-based learning in older years, there's a book called Can I Go Play Now by Greg Botterill, and he is fantastic, and I recommend people follow him on social media as well. He is such an advocate for play-based learning in Key Stage 1. Everything he says just makes sense, and he has children's happiness at the forefront of everything that he does and everything that he says. So they are the 2 bits of research. They're 2 books that are amazing, but a lot of Alistair Bryce-Clegg has a lot of podcasts that he's been on that I really recommend that people can listen to as well. And that's kind of where I began my journey, was with those 2 books, and then that's what opened up my real love of everything that I do now.
That's great. We will put a link to these books in the show notes. So head there if you are interested in reading a bit more or listening to any more about play-based learning. Taylor, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. So thank you so much. Can you please tell our listeners where they can find you?
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. So thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I have a Instagram page. It's at Missy's Classroom 92. That's my Instagram page. So people can come and follow me, drop me a message, any questions. My DMs are always open, so I'm always happy to chat.
Thank you again to our listeners, and tune in for next week for another episode.